Hello, and we are so happy to have you back at the museum for our third brown bag this of 2022. And I am Gayla Kesey. I am Education Manager here at the Augusta Museum of History. And our guest speaker today is Dayton Sherrouse. And he is going to be talking. He is Executive Director of the Augusta Canal Authority, and he has held that position since 1998. And he is going to be talking about the forces and changes that impacted the Augusta Canal following World War II. And during his tenure at the Augusta Canal Authority and Augusta Tomorrow, he has overseen the development and implementation of the 1993 Augusta Canal Master Plan. And over the past 25 years, the plan has led to Augusta Canal's designation by the U.S. Congress as a National Heritage Area, to the rehabilitation of the city's former textile mills, the build-out of a multi-purpose recreational trail and park system, and creation of the Augusta Canal Discovery Center and the Petersburg tour boats, of which we do have a real replication downstairs. And we actually, one of the programs that I want to highlight with you is every Saturday we have a Voices of the Past program where we bring history to life. And on the second Saturday every month at 12:30, 1:30, and 2:30, we have the Petersburg boat captain come to life and tell you about going down the river in the 1800s. So with nothing more, I give you Dayton Sherrouse.
Just have to say, I rode that boat while they went through.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I appreciate all of you coming out on this rainy day. My topic today, I found out over the last few years when I talked to a group, I assume they know all of the history. And so I found out that's not always true. And so at the very start, I'm going to give you a very brief history from the beginning. And that goes back to 1840. And the city had been in existence for about 100 years, but the population's declined pretty rapidly in the 1830s and the early 1840s. And the reason for that was twofold, really. Augusta was, of course, the second oldest city in Georgia after Savannah, and it prospered as a retail center for 100 years. But there was a depression in 1837 when the cotton prices went down in the tubes, and also the railroad had just been completed from Augusta to Atlanta. And we had these other cities that had become incorporated after Augusta, like Atlanta and Macon and Columbus. And so suddenly we had this competition. It wasn't just Savannah and Augusta. And so Henry Cumming was the son of the first mayor of Augusta, and he was a lawyer, and he had traveled around the country, and particularly in the Northeast, and he observed these cities with textile mills that were rapidly expanding and contributing to the economies of those cities. And so he came up with the idea to build a canal in Augusta. And of course there was a lot of scratching of the heads and saying, you know, building a canal. And he had been to Lowell, Massachusetts, and he had his own, using his own money, he paid the surveyors to come down and see if it was possible to create a canal and draw water off the Savannah River to power textile mills. And of course, basically the economy at that time was very agrarian. It was cotton and tobacco, no industry as we know it today. And some people again question that because they thought of industry as kind of not treating employees properly and not good working conditions and all that kind of thing. But finally the community accepted it, and and an amazing thing between the construction started in 1845, April of 1845, and it was finished in November of 1846. Now think about that. That's about 18 months. Now there were no drag lines. There were no mechanized equipment. It was basically picks and shovels and that kind of thing. And the construction was divided into sections. And the railroad crews that had recently completed the railroad to Atlanta took half of the construction sections, and two plantation owners took the other two sections, and as I said before, built it in 18 months. I mean, if we wanted to do that today, we'd probably be tied up with all the environmental clearance for years, even if you get through that to build it. And it prospered. It was really built for three purposes: transportation and the boats that were used to bring cotton to market in Augusta. They could now come out of the river from upstream, lock into the canal, and come down to 13th Street and offload their cotton or whatever they were bringing to Augusta. And it either went to the mills or by wagon over to the river, and a steamboat, powerboat would take them down to take the cotton down to to Savannah, and wherever it went, all over the United States and perhaps overseas. And so it all of a sudden offered employment opportunities on doing something other than working on the farm, which in a lot of cases there was no other questions to do but for them to do that. And so it prospered. The only problem was they contracted for more horsepower than the initial construction of the canal could provide. And originally it was only 40 feet wide and about 6 feet deep. And so there were lawsuits involved because they couldn't get the amount of water they needed to run their turbines. And so it was widened in 1875 to 12 feet deep and a minimum of 100 feet wide. And so we went from like 350 horsepower capacity to 14,000 horsepower that we could generate. And we had 12 mills, textiles, and grits mills, and lumber, and sawmills, and all that, drawing power off the canal. And they had to locate on the canal because at that time there was no electricity. And so they had to locate where there was power, and the water provided the power. It was hydromechanical, not hydroelectric, because the machines and everything were hooked up by line shafts and pulleys that generated the power they needed. And so it was a period of prosperity for that period of time early on up until the early 1900s, and then electricity came along, and suddenly you didn't have to locate on the canal. You could locate 5 miles away, and the power companies would run power out to you. So the importance of the canal for that purpose started to diminish a little bit by 1900. But they were plagued in that period of time by a lot of issues. There was a lot of flooding. If you've studied Augusta history, not only downtown but elsewhere, and when there wasn't flooded, there were times of drought, and there was not enough water in the river to run the turbines, and so they had to shut their plants down. There was no Clark Hill, there was no reservoir, so they couldn't operate. And so after, like I say, about 1900, the importance kind of declined, and we had been called ourselves after the construction of the canal, because we patterned it after Lowell, Massachusetts, and so we were the Lowell of the South until about 1900, and then there was a nationwide movement called the City Beautiful movement started in Chicago with the city plan in Chicago around 1900, and Augusta then called itself the Garden City, and we still use that today, and I think it's very appropriate. The period that I'm talking about today, post-World War II, say 1950s to 1980, was again kind of a dead period because the importance of the canal, it could not get any more power out of it, and the city to some degree lost interest in it, and it went into a period of decline, and the city no longer supported it really. At one point they had a city department, a canal crew that maintained things, and they ended up doing away with that, and so the only department that really looked after anything on the canal was the utilities department. I said earlier the three purposes of the canal was transportation, and that was like the Petersburg boats, and the other one was for water supply. The city had one of the first public water supply systems in the country, dating back to where they are now is 1899, but the original date for the waterworks was in the 1850s, when where the Sears department store used to be on Walton Way and 15th Street. Prior to that, it was Allen Park, but prior to that, there was 3 settling basins over there. So they pulled water out of the canal, and it would go through a process of getting water over there, letting it settle out, go down to the second pond, and then the third, and then it was put out in that time the water system for the city. And of course, those times were the pipes were wooden, hollowed out logs, and so it was one of the first in the country. And in 1899, the waterworks was moved up to where it is now on the canal, really behind Lake Olmsted, up in that area, and they operated it the same way, and still today they use is hydromechanic. All the water they take out and pump up to the treatment plant at Daniel Village, 4 miles away, up the elevation rises, is still done hydromechanically. The turbines are, the water pumps are hooked directly to the shaft coming out of the turbines, and it pumps all that water up there without any electricity involved at all, which is pretty remarkable, and it saves the city or waterworks $1 million a year in electricity costs. But at that time, the community, and particularly the city government, viewed the canal as a nuisance. And there's another, in fact, Herbert Elliott, who was some of you have been around here a while might remember Herbert. He was a county commissioner at that time, and he referred to it as the cesspool, C-E-S-S, the cesspool. And the reason for that, in those days, the storm sewer and the sanitary system were combined. In other words, you had stormwater and sanitary within the same pipe. And particularly as the canal came in the downtown area, those pipes went directly into the canal. And so it was polluted, and the news of the day on anything on the canal was probably, you know, how many vehicles they had to pull out, or bodies, or refrigerators, or other trash that was thrown into the canal. And it was a pretty nasty place. But after the city started the separation project, separating sanitary from water, stormwater, in the 1960s, and that since then the canal has cleaned up immensely, and of course the city monitors that very closely because of it being the source of water for the water system in the city. Even today, occasionally they still find some systems that are still connected together. And the problem is that when those were installed back in the day, there's no maps that showed them. And so they've been systematically, as they try to find pipes that are still combined to go in and separate those. And the best way we find them nowadays is when there's an issue. And we've recently had a problem at 10th Street with big sewer, a storm sewer outfall there, and the pollution in that third level of the canal has remained high due to there was a big pipe combined from 10th Street area down into there, and that's since been corrected, and they're still, finding one occasionally, but the water quality is really good nowadays, and one of the best things to see to prove that is that we see otters in the canal. Canal otters, river otters frequently, and they don't habitat polluted water, and you will see them quite often playing around in the canal. Another major event that was occurring in this point in time was there was a proposal to build something that we now call the Calhoun Expressway, and Mayor Sankin, George Sankin, who was the mayor at the time, he had the idea that we didn't really need the canal, and it ought to be dried up, and we would run the bed of the canal, use it for the right-of-way of Calhoun Expressway. And fortunately, that didn't happen. And his rationale for doing that was Georgia Power had a proposal originally that was dated back in 1929. And they proposed building a power plant and using the water from the canal up near where the waterworks is now. And what that would do from that point, coming on in the downtown area, there would be no water in the canal. And King Mill filed a lawsuit against them, and various mayors after that really continued to support it. And it finally died because when Millard Beckham was mayor, it was still floating. That idea was floating around, and he finally looked at the numbers, and the original estimates for how much money would come to the city from the Georgia Power was very little more than they were already getting from it, and so the idea was killed at that time. And at the same time, another Cumming, Joe Cumming, was on the Historic Commission for the state, and he proposed and put in a proposal that the canal be named a National Register, be listed on the National Register, and that was done. And so that provided another layer of protection in terms of the ability of the canal to be continued as we see it today. And then in the late 1970s, the Historic American Engineering Record Department, part of the Department of the Interior, came in and did measured drawings and wrote up history of all the existing buildings, like all the mills on the canal. And that again provided a layer of interest in the community that we didn't have earlier in the previous decades. And then in the early 1970s, there was a proposal by Mayor Newman, Lewis Newman, to build a state park on the canal, and the state agreed to that, and it would run from basically where Sibley Mill is now up to I-20 and that area, and there was some land transfers between the city and the state, so Mayor Newman, to advance that idea, he built the bridge that's across the canal from the Croc Center across the King, where Sibley Mill is located today. He had that, it was a wooden bridge there, and he put a concrete bridge in there that we still use today as the city's contribution to the state. But unfortunately, due to the early 1970s, we were in a pretty severe recession. and so the state was cutting back expenditures, and they abandoned the idea. They weren't building anything new, and at the same time they were having difficulty even maintaining the state parks that they already had. And so they said their major emphasis was to continue to maintain and protect what they had, and they wasn't building anything new. So all of us here kind of privately dubbed it the Mayor Newman Memorial Bridge. We thought it was appropriate to do that for him. And at the same time period in the 70s, the waterworks up at where it is today, the American Waterworks Association designated the waterworks up there as a historic landmark, and that again added an additional layer of protection, and all of that together was you could see it building of community interest in more of quality of life kind of issues and historic preservation and that kind of thing, and that continued to build, and like I said, the early part of this period of time we're talking about now, the 50s to 1980. They were not as interested in the canal as we are today. I thought I turned it on. Okay, sorry about that. So it was a good time, and the community started demanding that the city get a renewed interest in the canal, and that did continue with other mayors that were elected after that period of time. Ed McIntyre, for instance, when he was mayor, he had an interest in not only the river but the canal, and Larry Sconyers, when he was mayor, he had an interest in it. So kind of jumping ahead on the time period, but all of that led to the creation of the Canal Authority by the Georgia General Assembly in 1989. It's a little outside this period of time that we're talking about, but so really from that time after the 1980s, if you were to divide up the history of the canal going back to the early days, I mean, it was early days could be classified as the early development and interest in the canal. And if you were to do the period after we're talking about today, say the 1980s to the current time, I would call it brighter prospects, because of all the things that has happened after then. And so not only was the canal received additional interest, finally after that designation there was a department, not a department, but an authority and staff dedicated solely to the development, not only the development, but for the protection of the canal. And then the designation by Congress, as she mentioned, was again another layer of protection for it. Unfortunately, today we don't have the support and commitment from the mayor and administration that we had in some of the prior decades, but hopefully that will change, because the canal now has, I've got all these plaques and proclamations in my office for 12 major awards that have been received since the Canal Authority was created in 1989. I don't know whether you watch, read Augusta Press, but I find today it gives you more information, unfortunately, than you can get from the Chronicle, and it's not old news. one of the writers for the Augusta Press, called Michael Myers, he has a story periodically, and always at the end of every story, he talks about something, and you'll just have a sentence or two, and he says, "Oops, I made a mistake. I'm jumping ahead for the next issue." And I guess my concluding remarks would be on my presentation today is Nancy will have to schedule another one to pick up from 1980 to the present day and do it. But there's several things that are going to happen that I'll just tease you with. But we've recently added a weather station behind the canal at Enterprise Mill. So you'll see the TV stations picking up, and people visiting our Discovery Center down there, or walking along the canal, they can stop and pull up anything with your cell phone, and as soon as we get the app operable, you can pick it up from home, or you can just go to our webpage, www.augustacanal.com, and when the home page comes up on the far right, you just click on weather station. It'll pop up on your phone, and it'll give you the temperature and weather and all that kind of thing. And we're using that as an educational tool, particularly with our school system. And then one other thing I'll mention is when I first started with the canal, people were asking where they could get information on the canal, and you had to send them to various places. And so we contracted with Dr. Ed Cashin at Augusta College to write the history of the canal, which he did, and we published this. And unfortunately, we may have 5 copies of it left, so we're really out of print. It was called "The Brightest Arm of the Savannah: The Augusta Canal, 1845 to 2000." And so what we've now done, rather than just reprint this one as it is, we've hired Dr. Leanne Caldwell, and many of you, I'm sure, know Leanne, and she's picking up 2000 and bringing it forward to current day. And we're going to reprint this as a revised edition. And I think she's on, the last time I talked, she's on her 4th draft of that. And so as soon as we conclude that and get agreement on that, we'll then reprint it, and we'll have copies again for sale. So it really is an important document, because in some respects, when you write about the history of Augusta, you can't do it without talking about the canal. So really, what Ed did, Dr. Cashin did, was it's like the history of Augusta through the eyes of the canal development over the years. And so it's received all kind of rewards from the state, and so it was a great document, and we just, I guess, happy that we ran out because we had 2,000 copies or something like that, and they're all gone of it. And like I say, last time I checked, we had less than 5 left. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate y'all coming out today, and I look forward to talking with you again, maybe.
Can we take a few questions?
Yeah.
If they have any questions or comments?
Did Olmsted design Lowell's Canal as well? Is that how he came to us?
No, it came about mainly because of Henry Cumming visiting Lowell, and it was patterned. Our canal system is patterned after it, but our system produces a lot more power than the ones in Lowell. The Merrimack River is not as powerful as the Savannah River is in terms of the amount of water that comes down, and so it really was. There was an engineer here called Phillips, and he was the engineer for the canal for probably the first 25 years, and it's been engineers involved every year, civil engineers, since that time. Unfortunately, I'm not an engineer. Unfortunately, I talk like someone sometimes, but I'm not. And so we contract a lot of our work out to Tom Robertson and Cranston Engineering. So we have, and of course we have a license with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that we have to comply with a lot of stuff on, and so they require plans developed by a civil engineer.
You mentioned there were 2 plantation owners that did 2 sections of the canal. Do you
Yeah.
know the names of the 2 plantations?
Yeah, James Coleman was one of them. He built Enterprise Mill, and his brother by marriage was pulling a blank on his name.
It's in the book.
It's in the book. It's in the book. But he was later a Superior Court judge, and they had a plantation on the canal. Benjamin Warren is his name.
Yeah.
And Warren Lake up by where the Delta Call Center is out on Riverwatch Parkway, his plantation was in that area right there. And they're the 2 that took the other remaining section that the railroad didn't build. And Warren Lake is named after him. It's not much of a lake nowadays, it's filled in. But interesting thing about them is that they got into a disagreement, and James Coleman, after he built Enterprise Mill, Benjamin Warren had some money in it, and they got in a disagreement about financially, and Benjamin Warren sued him, and it was drawn out over a period of time, but they eventually reconciled and got it straightened out.
Anybody else? One thing that he did not mention is that we have a partnership with the Augusta Canal and the Augusta Museum of History. We have the archives, the Enterprise Mill as well as King Mill.
That's great.
Some of them are protected because they just happen to have the Social Security number, so it's a little restricted. But we've actually had some PhDs that have been here working on it. But just if you ever want to go beyond his talk, we have him here and we're taking very good care. It's a partnership we developed, I guess, about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's good. And then also, the City Council presented a silver, whatever we call it,
Yeah.
In recognition of his benefit to the community and getting the canal built. And this is on the exhibit here somewhere.
Yes, it is. Downstairs.
And then also she mentioned the boat. We built a replica of the Petersburg boat, which was a little difficult. George Barrett, many of you may know George, it was his idea, and it was constructed across from King Mill, and people would go there during the day, take their lunches, and we had bleachers set up there, and they would take their lunch down there for the construction of it, and it's all wooden, no nails involved in it, and it was launched right there by what I refer to as the Newman Memorial Bridge in around 1993, and it made several trips to Savannah. And after it was finished, what do we do with it? And luckily, the museum was interested in it, and so it's been on over here, I guess officially on loan for.
It's on loan, but I challenge him to try to get it out of our building.
Bill, you had a question.
Yeah. Bea and I actually were there at the launching of that Petersburg boat, and we got a ride in it.
Yeah.
Very brief ride, but a ride. But I was going to mention the fact that in the 1970s, the canal was drained to get rid of a lot of the silt that had built up. And us bottle collectors had a great time.
Yeah, it was. And particularly around every bridge crossing, for some reason,
Yes.
in those days, people would be in their vehicles, and if their pop bottle or beer bottle was empty as they go across the bridge, they'd toss it over in the water. So particularly
a brief anecdote at the Broad Street Bridge at the canal, we found a lot of bottles with a bunch of marbles around them. And an old timer said that when the drunks came out of the taverns and they threw the bottles in the canal, the kids with their slingshots tried to break them. Happily, most of them were very bad shots.
Yeah, well, that bridge and also 15th Street Bridge there. Near
Dayton, you may or
major
may not
collection.
know this, but George Barrett gave the collection of all his records of building the boat. They're here as well.
But as Nancy mentioned, particularly on King Mill, which we purchased in 2001, we purchased, again, I'm jumping way ahead, we purchased the Sibley Mill in 2006, and that was pretty remarkable because the bank closed down a Graniteville company and just overnight, and it was like that time 400 or 500 people put out of work, but we were able to negotiate a purchase of that within 30 days, and we got everybody back to work that had been laid off. So it was pretty remarkable.
So is the King Mill still working then?
King Mill, yeah, we bought that in 2001 and leased it back to the major purchaser of their cloth, which was located out of Cincinnati, and had that back in operation in 30 days, and then they've now canceled their lease, and we operate the hydroelectric station in all three locations, Sibley, King, and Enterprise, and so we now have sold that to Cape Augusta, except for the hydro station. We still own that and sell power back to them, and also, but they're in the process of, I've seen the plans of putting apartments in the two main historic buildings, which would have about 350 apartments, market rate apartments in the mills. So that should be coming forth in a few weeks or months. Hopefully I can say that this is happening.
Dayton, thank you so much for coming today. One more question?
Just a comment. A number of years ago, had the opportunity to visit Lowell and their redone mills and canals and everything. And it's very, very nicely done, but my opinion is the Augusta Canal Authority does not need to bow to anybody. You all have done a fabulous job.
That's a great way to end this. Thank you all for coming. April 13th is our next one. Historic Augusta and how it got started.
Also want to tell you, April 16th, this reminds me, Canal Discovery Day. It's going to be down at the canal. We're going to be set up, and they're doing food, there's entertainment, there's raffles, there's a scavenger hunt, and there you can get a $10 pass to go to get a boat ride. You can go to the Ezekiel Harris house, and you can go to Meadow Gardens. We're really highlighting the canal on April 16th. Thank you so much for coming.
And Bill, one other thing we're doing that day is we're having a fishing clinic.
Yes.
Oh, really?
To get kids out, teaching them how to fish and get them interested in fishing.
You got a lot of good fish in that canal, yellow perch and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much, guys.